I have the distinct honor and pleasure of being joined by George Logothetis, who is a man who, for the purposes of this forum, is very important because he is wearing two different hats every day. He wears the hat of an entrepreneur, a businessman, an innovator, and he wears the hat of a philanthropist and someone who has, in fact, in addition to his role in helping to develop Concordia and the Concordia Forum and your philanthropies, you've also been involved not only in transforming your business, but helping others transform theirs. And so what I just wanted to start off by talking about is that with this global perspective that you're able to bring, what do you see in terms of innovation and how you've seen that it transformed your company, even before AI, just that understanding of it and how it's transformed people's lives?
Thank you. First of all, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Kevin, for those kind words. Look, when I was 19 years old, which is 30 years ago, innovation could be hiring women. I grew up in a world which was very male-dominated. Women didn't have a voice for the most part. And so it was considered innovative that we empowered women. I'm almost embarrassed to use that word now because life has moved on, thank God, and there is far less inequality than there was. But what we've tried to do at Libra Group and Libra Philanthropies is always preserve that innovative spirit. So, for example, we were some of the first to order autonomous drones. These were ordered a few years ago. This is equipment that, had they been available during Katrina, there wouldn't have been the disaster that was Katrina. This is equipment that can take 300 kilos of cargo and autonomously gets it from A to B. These are drones that can operate 24/7, and I think this is one of the, let's say, pragmatic opportunities that AI and innovation affords us. We've also tried to empower young people that have not had opportunity. I don't read CVs, and a lot of people find that strange, but I don't. I like to read people. I like to understand the why as opposed to the what. Why? How resilient were you? Why were you resilient? What drove you to be so? Do you understand where your family came from? Do you understand what responsibilities you have inherited through born? Do you understand the difference between freedoms granted and freedoms earned? So we've tried to, if you go back sort of 15 or 20 years, it was deemed innovative to be diverse. So, when we set up Libra Group in 2004, simply put, the shipping markets were high and the aviation markets were low. Everyone in shipping thought that the boom would never end, and everyone in aviation thought the same thing, that the bust would never end. So it was through that competing information and almost judging market cycles through the lens of psychology, through the lens of body language even, dare I say. It was deemed very innovative for a Greek shipping company to start buying planes. People thought we were crazy. Sometimes being thought of as crazy is a curse, sometimes a blessing, right? So we've always tried to keep that innovative spirit alive in everything that we do.
And that's something that's very profound. And for this audience who's grappling with essentially what is another transformative innovation, I can say, just as a perspective, is that over the years, and I know we talked before, I mentioned this, is that I have seen how automation over the past couple decades has really transformed lives. It's made some things possible. It has made new jobs possible. But at the same time, the number of people you need to do many of these old jobs keeps dropping. That I've gone to a steel factory outside of Pittsburgh, which used to be the biggest steel production center in the world. And the factory produced 5 times as much steel with 1/8 as many people. And so you had to adapt to that. So what have you been doing in terms of with not just automation, but AI? And for how long? Because a lot of people here, we've been getting some sense of this, but you've been adapting to this for a decade in a way that many people here aren't aware of.
Well, Kevin, thank you. And I think you can just look through history, right? I mean, some industries die and other industries get born. And when the industries die, it's, people are paralyzed by fear, because anxiety is the fear of tomorrow, whereas depression is perhaps the mortgage of yesterday. And it's easier to look at yesterday than it is to envision tomorrow. So I think, this is a trend throughout history. You're the studier of history and you're a studier of economics. So I think number one, deal with the fear, accept it, realize it, and just recognize that with every industry that reduces in this world, there's 5 industries that get created. One of the things that I'm very proud of that we've done within our organization is that we have partnered using our original shipping company. We've been using our vessels as labs. So it's a lab, if you think about it. It's a piece of equipment that goes around the sea, and new technology is coming in where these ships are being used as labs to test that technology. So one example is underwater cleaning robots. So what happens until today in the world of shipping is that ships come out of the water, they have to get cleaned, and then they go back into the water, and the drag efficient is reduced. Today, there is a whole new industry of robotic, AI-driven drones that are cleaning the ships. It doesn't mean to say that the ships won't need to come out of the water to get repaired, but all of a sudden, you have an entire new industry that is being designed and growing at record speed with the new technology that is available. So something dies, something lives. Isn't that the history of humanity? And I think the mindset ultimately drives the outcome. And if the mindset is paralyzed by fear, then you have certain limitations. And if the mindset is enabled with vision, unity, hope, then all of a sudden you get underwater robotic drone cleaning companies that have been created. If you'd said this to me 10 years ago, I would have looked at you very blankly.
And if anybody doubts that this isn't relevant, think about the fact that ships move most of our world's bulk goods, and that anything that increases the efficiency of the ships, that reduces their drag, reduces fuel consumption, increases the ability and the speed to deliver those goods, it's actually better for the environment and it's better for the economies for a larger group of people.
Absolutely, and it all adds up. And it hurts me when I hear people either not being aware or being willing to be aware of the damage that is happening to this planet. And it's something that may not affect me in my life, it may not affect you, but it will affect my children and my children's children. So, I met before a group of 25 Colombian interns discussing this very point, who are part of our internship program. But, going back to what you said, the AI is also being used in our world to calculate with higher degree precision using weather patterns, the moon, sea patterns, to navigate the vessels. And if you save 2% or 3% of every voyage because you have heightened information processing capability, and then you multiply that by 35,000 ships or whatever it is that exist in the world, it's a material impact.
Well, and we actually saw during the global pandemic that emissions went down, that everything became more localized, and as we came roaring back, we've seen that the issues in the world, even the world weather patterns and everywhere else, have come roaring back as well. We now see 100-year storms that hit countries every year or two. We see droughts that once might have been every 100 years happening all the time. And that prediction, as you said, and being able to understand that, perhaps that's one of the keys to actually selling people and recognizing that even not just in terms of the transformative nature of technology, but that the world is transforming whether we are ready or not, and perhaps that's one of the keys to understanding and being able to act on it.
Absolutely. I also think, Kevin, it's important, human progress is incremental. I mean, the healthiest form of progress is not instant. It's hard. Think of it like a big oil tanker that is hard to stop, hard to turn, but, again, as I was telling the young interns, it is through the work of the good people of the world that the humankind improves and progresses, as a general comment. I am worried about the emotional toll, not the pragmatic opportunities. The pragmatic opportunities, you can put them down, you can see them, they're there for the whole world to see. Why is the world more lonely? through the introduction of technology? Why is the world more invisibly disconnected, whilst at the same point in time we are more visibly connected? Why are teenage suicide rates in Japan rocketed? Why the other day, terrible, you wake up and you see a 14-year-old girl jump out of a building in New York City? The mental health cost of the technologization of humanity is not given a strong enough voice, in my opinion. And that's the liability side to the equation. So the asset side is we become more efficient, we become smarter, quicker. What does it do to the soul of humanity if you technologize yourself too quickly?
Years ago, I read something that talked about how one of the single most devastating things that actually happened to society was the invention of precision clocks and precision timekeeping. That even though it made sailing more effective, because you now had longitude, you had a number of things that you could do more effectively, but what it did is it changed people's lives. Everything got measured in hours and minutes rather than just simply by getting things done, by having and living your lives. Instead, you were watching the clock, watching your time. There wasn't that same sense of it. We've got now, I mean, as you mentioned, the Japanese have a term called hikikomori, or shut-in. This idea that you have people, especially young men, who don't interact with the outside world. Maybe they go out and they go to their job and then they come back again and that's it. South Korea has a very real similar problem. It's got the highest broadband rates in the world. It has the most online people proportionately, and yet the birth rate is dropping rapidly. There's this disconnect in terms of people. And how do you deal with that in terms of, just in your company, in your philanthropy, in your lives? You're dealing with mental health, you're dealing with all these challenges. How do you get people to actually reconnect with others and to help them?
I think, number one, it starts with being aware, because we can't fix what we're not aware of. Number two, I think it's learning to be less reactive and more reflective. And so, what I do as George is I don't have emails on my phone. It doesn't mean I work any more or less, but what it means is to me that I'm somehow disconnected from it. My brain is still working, it works all the time, doesn't stop, but somehow the thoughts are purer when there's less need to react. And, where there's a fine mind that is constantly mortgaged by information, married to anxiety, that fine mind becomes less fine. And at the end of the day, we're only as good as our ideas. An idea can be worth a lifetime's work. But you've got to have that idea. You've got to give the mental space to have it. So I think governing technology instead of allowing technology to govern us is almost rule number one. That means protecting our children. That means not having a free flow as it relates to technology for our young kids. We're quite tough with our children, but the brains haven't formed until they're 20 years old. So, and we don't have control over the information that is being intaked. The way I see it is that it can be a tool to pragmatically enhance your life and keep your emotions in check if you're aware. But if you're not aware, it's a progressive intrusion of constant reactivity and anxiety, which can mortgage your thoughts. And it happens slowly. It's not like it happens from a Monday to a Tuesday. It's a process that takes place over time. So I think the number one antidote is awareness. Education. Democracies are only as strong as the education system at the end of the day. So that's point one. Point two is understanding history. It's what we talked about. Understanding the difference between freedoms that we have been given and freedoms that we've earned ourselves. Understanding that less is more. Less is more often than not.
And well, I think that connected with the audience, especially given the sheer amount of information that has been thrown at you today. Definitely sometimes less is more. But Also, there are two things that we had mentioned that I thought were relevant. I just want to bring up in the limited time we have. One is that who controls the algorithms? Who decides the information that goes into AI, that goes into social media, that goes into our connectivity? Being aware of that and knowing what biases that has and what's being done, that it's not that AI is selecting for you, it's that somebody is determining the parameters of the AI that does a selection. So how do you deal with that?
I think, first of all, the over-technologization can actually, paradoxically, reduce our perspective. With a reduced perspective, we can actually become less grateful. With the less gratitude, we can actually become less happy.
Agree with that?
So I'd start with that. I think, I've heard a lot of things when it comes to talking about AI that are quite scary. I think the scariest one is when I had a conversation with one of the top social media experts of the world, a very smart person. And I said to him, man, who writes the algorithms? So who's writing it? I mean, what if the algorithm says you get points if you're sad? Does that mean everyone becomes sad because everyone wants to get points? Or if the algorithm says, well, you get points if you're dishonest? I'm not saying that's the case, but it's like a governance structure. I said, who writes it? Is there like a guy in a room that writes it and decides the governance of the future breeds of humanity? And he started laughing at me. He said, George, what are you talking about? People aren't writing the algorithms anymore. AI is writing the algorithms. So then who writes the AI? Okay, another AI. But then at some point in time, there must be someone that constitutionally gives a framework of human progress that is good.
And you've seen this, is that even when AI, for example, in visual AI, where they found inherent biases in, like when it generates people, that the people have certain features, they have certain expectations based on the programmers, based on the people, what data they selected, where they focused on how they did that. And so you can see it in music, you can see it everywhere, that those influences exist somewhere, even if they're back in the beginning. And then the last thing I think I just wanted to mention is that you wanted to give perspective to everyone here, and we talked a bit about that. But what would you tell the young people, and what would you tell the young people based on your experience going around the world with happiness, and what should they be aware of?
Well, listen, to understand happiness, first of all, understand sadness, right? Where was I yesterday? Yesterday, I was in Panama. At about this time, we were at a children's cancer facility, where it's a facility that aims to protect the psychological well-being of the parents, to protect the mindset, which goes down to the children, because a strong brain has the capability to overcome a weak body. So I'd say exposure. Expose, but exposure doesn't mean reading more Wikipedias. Exposure means search for the suffering that exists. Get perspective from it. Understand it. It means being a little bit more tolerant. It means being more reflective instead of reactive. It means taking time off from it. For me, what works for me is I don't put my emails on until 9 or 10 a.m. in the morning. So I have 3 hours free. I'm not doing nothing in those 3 hours. I'm thinking all the time, constantly. But the thoughts are purer and they become heavier when those emails come on. I'd also, to the young people, I'd say this, that understand where we come from. To understand where you want to go, question one, where am I from? What responsibilities have I inherited? What obligations do I have to my family, to my parents? Go to the graveyard of your grandparents. Ask what suffering they endured. Why did they do it? And it puts life into perspective. And I go back to, over-technologization can reduce perspective. Reduced perspective leads to reduced gratitude. So reverse that coin. Search for this perspective. Don't expect it to come to you. And information intake is not just reading off a computer. Information intake is going to places of pain. It is traveling if you can. It is getting out of your comfort zone. It is being courageous to be grateful for, as I say, all those freedoms that we have been granted that we didn't earn. And I think if one can understand that, then that is a good path to happiness and fulfillment as well.
That is an excellent note, I think, to end on. I know that we are out of time. So thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos.